crashes over me, crashes over me. For you are for us, you are not against us. Champion of heaven, you made a way for all to enter in.
Well, good morning again. We're glad you're here today. Before we get started, I wanted to show you that we have this update. Some of you may have gotten the email from us, but we have an update on kind of what's going on at the church, what's happening in the future, a lot of good news, ministries that you may not be familiar with. So you're going to pick one up on your way out, just learn more about Chaparral, what's happening this summer, and we're looking forward to in the fall. You can do that. It looks just like this, and we hope that you'll take a look at it. Today we're going to continue our series about fear. And I hope that after last week, maybe you're sleeping a little bit better at night. Because we've been talking about the things that keep us up at night. Those fears that kind of get to be knots in our stomach. Those things that weigh us down when we try to go to sleep, when they just pop into our heads and we just can't get sleep that night. So last week, if you remember, we kind of handed out these pieces of paracord. We have a few left out there, I think. And we said, we're going to tie some knots in these and name our fears. Just identify what those fears are. And as we go through the week, we're going to try to untie those knots. As we deal with our own fears, we'll try to untie those knots that kind of get in our lives. Some of you have been pretty creative. Some of you have taken these and made them into bracelets. Some of you have made them into kind of on your keychain, little things like that. It's great because we want to keep this kind of in our forefront of our minds for the next few weeks, is that yes, we do have fears, and yes, God wants us to untie those fears, because fears can paralyze us. Fears can hold us back from the life that God intended us to have. God does not want us to be a people of fear. Our kind of theme verse has been in 2 Timothy, where Paul writes, God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline. Now, Paul is writing these words from prison. I mean, he is in prison, and it says that he has been abandoned, that he feels betrayed, and he has every reason to be afraid, but that is not what he's going to pass on to Timothy. Timothy is someone he's mentoring, who's this young minister that is going to have his own problems. And so Paul says to Timothy, God has given you a spirit of power, a spirit of love, and of self-discipline. And that's what he wants to pass on because, like I said, Timothy's going to have his own problems, and Paul might not be there. In the same way that you and I are going to pass on something to our kids or those around us. They watch how we react to these difficult challenges in life. Do they see us as people who react in fear, that we're afraid, or are people who react in faith? Is faith our dominant reaction to life's challenge? Is that our go-to response? Or is fear? Because people are watching, and what we hand on to kids, our kids, matters. And the biggest thing that we pass along to those kids is that they're not alone. Or to our friends who are going through life challenges, they're not alone. Right? Paul feels abandoned. And yet he says to Timothy, I'm not alone. God has given me a spirit of power. He has given you a spirit of power. A spirit that says, fear not. Be of good courage. Don't be afraid. And that's what Paul wants to pass on, because being alone is a great fear for a lot of people. And God says you're not. In his book, Blue Like Jazz, Donald Miller tells a story about some Navy SEALs that were on a mission to release some hostages from a deep, dark prison. And these SEALs kind of fight their way in, and they get to this area where these hostages are being held, and they break in the door and like, okay, we're American soldiers, we're to rescue you, come with us. And these hostages were so afraid, and fear had paralyzed them, and they are sitting there huddled together, kind of all clustered up, and they're not moving. Like, come on, you got to go with us. They won't move because they're paralyzed by fear. So one of the SEALs has the idea of taking off his helmet, and he goes down, he sits right next to one of them and just kind of cuddles up next to him, gets his nice and close, and just sits there for a minute, quietly, making contact. And finally their eyes meet, and he says, look, I'm an American. I'm here to help you. Don't be afraid. Just follow me. And slowly that person gets up, and he follows that soldier out of the room, and the rest along with him. Simple. I'm here. You're not alone. Don't be afraid. And God is saying the same thing to you and to me, helping us to untie those knots. Well, today, the fear I talk about is one that maybe we all have had from time to time. It's a big fear. And it is the fear of disappointing God. I mean, the creator of the universe. What if you and I have disappointed God himself? Maybe we feel like we haven't done enough. We've not been a good example to those around us. Or we've kind of wasted our time that God's given us. Or maybe we've gone along, we finally figured it out. We know what God kind of wants for us, but we look back and we say, man, I wasted so much time and did so much damage. I can never make it right. And we have this reoccurring fear, this big, huge knot that we've disappointed God. You think back to when you were a kid. I know when I was a kid, I didn't mind if my parents got mad at me or if they yelled at me, put me in timeout. That was fine. What I didn't want to hear was, I'm disappointed in you. Anybody else feel that way? I'm disappointed in you. Because sometimes we don't see it as, I'm disappointed in what you did or that event you shouldn't have done that you went to. We take it personally. I'm disappointed in you. And that disappointment becomes our identity. And now all of us then begin to handle this fear differently. This fear of disappointing God, we have different ways of coping with it. Some of us try to achieve. We try to be a better asset for God. We kind of think if we do more good, if we can be a good member of the team, then God will forget the bad stuff. It's like a football team, right? You got football season coming up. You got those players that they're a real mess off the field, right? They're out getting into trouble. They're out creating problems, bad press. But man, they are so doggone good on the field that they stay on the team. So we think that if we can be like that, if we can be so much better for God in some areas, he'll overlook the bad areas. But the danger with that is it leads to religious pride. And the Bible has a lot to say against that kind of attitude. Other folks, when they feel they've disappointed God and they have this fear, is they begin to buckle down. They say, well, you know what, I'll just try harder. I'll put my head down and work harder to impress God. It ends up being like those dogs on a track. You ever see those dogs on a racetrack that chase the bunny? You know what I'm talking about? Do the dogs ever catch the bunny? No. And we don't catch the bunny either. We keep trying and trying and trying and trying and trying, but we can't get there. And we get frustrated. Or maybe we choose to rebel. We say, well, if God's disappointed in me, then I'll really show him how disappointed he can be. And we start going out and we get all kinds of trouble. We think, well, I'll just have fun while it lasts. Man, I'll just go for it. But the fun never lasts. And eventually we find ourselves broken, sitting in a pile of rubble that is our life. We want to go home. Or maybe you say, you know what? I'm not that bad. And, I'm better than that guy. We start to think that maybe God grades on a curve. Anybody here ever been in school and had a test that goes on a curve? Right? You're not competing with 100%. You're not competing with perfection. Who are you competing with on a curve? Everybody else. Back when I was at Purdue in engineering, we had a class. It was called Physics 152. I remember the number because they flunked, I'm not lying about this, they flunked 4 of 5 students from this class. 4 of 5. Because they wanted to see which one would stay in aerospace engineering and which 4 or 5 would go to mechanical or electrical engineering, something like that. Something easier. I'm kidding if you're an engineer. But here's the thing. So I knew this was the case. Everyone knew this was the case, so I studied. And I mean, I'm telling you, I went and got old tests. I studied, I worked. I mean, and so you go to this lecture hall, and by the way, back in those days, like way back, you didn't have laptops, you had lap boards. So you go to a lecture hall, and you had a piece of board you put on your lap. Anybody else had done this beside me? You had your book, and your paper, and your pencil, and you're trying to take notes while you're balancing this book and stuff on your lap. And the professor's up there, like Kramer from Seinfeld, just talking away, writing with one hand, erasing with the other. It was that kind of class. So I studied and studied and studied for this test. Well, there's a 5-page test. At page 3, after 2 hours, the professor says, time. I'm like, oh, I'm dead. Right? I didn't even finish. I didn't come close to finishing this test. And so I walk out of the classroom, and everyone else is kind of doing the same thing, like, oh, well, I didn't finish either. Well, how bad was this? And we begin to think that maybe it'll be curved. Maybe we'll be saved by the curve. Well, about 5 days later, after agonizing and waiting, you go to the lecture hall, and there's a big list of paper with your social security number on one side and a bunch of grades. And you walk up to that piece of paper and start looking for your number, right? And you look over, and I had gotten a 45 out of 100. And here's the thing. Yeah, it's an F, like a big, huge F. But it was one of the top scores on that test. And the problem with a curve is, you can't celebrate, can you? If you walk up to the paper and you're like, I did terrible. Because you don't want to be that guy or that gal that set the curve. So you can't even be excited about it. Because curve isn't set against perfection, it's set against everybody else. Or let's say, for example, you go out camping. You go to Payson, you go up camping, something like that. You're with your buddies, right? And all of a sudden a bear comes out of the woods. Starts chasing you. Do you have to outrun the bear? No, just the slowest guy in your group, right? That's a curve. Well, here's the thing. God doesn't grade on a curve. And the problem with a curve is, even if we believe that, what's the standard? How do you know you're in the top half? How do you know you've done well enough? And that same fear of disappointing God comes back. So maybe you end up just giving up. Some people, they face that fear of disappointing God and they say, you know what, I'm done. I know there's no way, no curve is so big that I can pass. We find ourselves broken and without hope and just giving up. And so we distract ourselves. We play games, or we check social media every 2 seconds, or we medicate ourselves, but we ignore the fact that we are without hope because we've given up. Well, if any of that sounds familiar to you, as you sit here today, any of those scenarios sound familiar to you, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. Anybody else hate that phrase? I hate that phrase. I got good news and I got bad news. How many of you want to hear the good news first? Raise your hand. One. Okay. How many want to hear the bad news first? Yeah, I'm that kind of person, right? Like, it can only go up from the bad news. It's like the artist. There's an artist one time who was selling his paintings. And he goes to the art gallery to see how well his paintings are selling. And the art gallery owner says, well, I got some good news, I got some bad news. He goes, what's the good news? Well, the good news is a guy came in yesterday and asked the question, if that when the artist dies, when you die, will the value of the paintings go up? And I said, yeah, of course. Whenever usually an artist dies, the value goes up. So this guy bought all of your stuff. That's great news. What's the bad news? Well, the bad news was he was your doctor. Right? So here's, sorry. It was good. So here's the bad news. The bad news is that joke. No, here's the bad news. Right? The bad news is you're going to disappoint God. Right? The bad news is we will disappoint God. God's going to have that disappointed parent face like this. Right? Isn't that awesome? Right? They have that look. They have that look of like, oh man, you messed up again. And God's going to have that face. In Romans 3:23 it says, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We have not lived up to God's expectations. We have disappointed him. There's only one person who's aced the test. Got 100%. He set the curve. And that was Jesus. And his standard is perfection too. In Matthew 5:48, he says very specifically, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And he wasn't joking. He says that's the goal. The standard is perfection. There's no curve, there's no just good enough, there's no tipping the scales in our favor. So, what's the good news? The good news is that the person who set the curve is here to help. The one who said the standard is perfection has promised to be with us. Remember last week we talked about Peter walking on water? Could Peter walk on water by himself? No, he didn't have the ability. It was impossible. He did that because Jesus said, come here. And he trusted Jesus. When he saw the storm, he had faith in God. He focused on his faith and not on his fear. But when he started paying attention to the wind and the waves, right, fear went up and faith went down. And he began to sink. He took his eyes off of his faith. Well, the same thing is going on here. Jesus is saying to us, come. You got to trust me. You can walk on water if you have faith and if you believe. So we need to trust that God has the best intentions for us. In Matthew 11, Jesus said this, come, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. This yoke is a way of life. And what he's saying is, it's not going to be like super easy, but I'm here to help you carry it. I'm here to help you carry it through life's challenges. So trust me. So the scale and the standard did not go down, but rather he is there to help us up and help us carry it. So if you have that fear of disappointing God, if you have that fear, that knot in your stomach today, Jesus says, come. I'm going to help you carry that load. In Luke 18 rather, Jesus is telling a parable about two people, a Pharisee and a tax collector. And he says this, he also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous, that they had a curve, and regarded others with contempt. Two men, he said, went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. Now sometimes as Christians we look down on Pharisees. We see them as legalistic. Oh, he's Pharisaical, he's a Pharisee. Well, in Jesus' day, these were guys who tried. They tried to keep all 613 commandments. They tried to do the right thing. And a lot of people revered them and looked up to them as righteous, as close to God. But the tax collectors, everyone hated them. They're the lowlifes. They're the people, the Jewish people, that had gone to Rome, the occupation, and said, tell you what, we will collect taxes from our own people as long as we get a cut. They're looked down upon. They're considered outcasts, the lowest of the low. Well, these two go to pray. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying like this, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of my income, and I'm super humble too. Like, what's this guy doing? He's playing the curve. It's like, you know what, I give a tenth of my income, I do all this great stuff, and I'm better than them. Meanwhile, though, the tax collector is there too. But he's off kind of by himself. He knows who he is. He knows he's a traitor, a sellout, probably beyond hope. His prayer is different. The tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his chest and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. He knew there was no curve anywhere ever that was going to save his score. He knew he was without hope. He couldn't measure up, and so he was honest. And it is this very simple, heartfelt prayer, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And God's response was simple too. I tell you, Jesus said, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. This guy didn't go home alone. He was justified. God was with him. He didn't beat the curve. He discovered what grace is. He discovered what compassion is. And I know it can be hard. It can be hard for us to actually admit and to know what that kind of grace is like, to know what compassion is like when people have it for us. Because in our heads, we have that record. We remember our disappointments. We remember our failures. We play them over and over and over like a broken record, repeating themselves that we have disappointed God and those around us. But those records can be broken, and those knots of fear untied by grace. There is no knot tied so tight that grace can't untie it. One of my favorite stories is Les Mis. There's a musical too, it's all right, but the story is what's great, okay? It's a book written by Victor Hugo. And in this story, in the book you get a bit more than you do in the musical or the movies. In the book, there's a bishop. And he starts off just an everyday kind of pastor. He has a meeting with Napoleon, a chance meeting with Napoleon, and Napoleon makes him this great bishop, very powerful person. But he doesn't stop being a simple, poverty-stricken pastor. He takes the money and gives 90% of it away. He takes this huge palace he gets, and he gives it to the hospital. He says, use this to take care of people, and lives in a little bitty house. He, in a time in France of revolution and pain, here's a man who simply showed compassion and grace to those around him. Well, one night he's going home, and there, outside of his house, is a man sleeping. This man is poor, starving, disheveled, because he has just got out of prison. He is on lifetime probation after spending 19 years in prison for stealing some bread to feed a child. He is broken, he is hard, he has been hurt, he is afraid. And the bishop wakes him up, and the man wakes up and he sees him, and he's afraid, and he goes to run away, but the bishop stops and says, no, come inside. And he invites this parolee, this former prisoner, inside of his house. He gives him a meal, puts him by the fire where he can get warm, and gives him a bed for the night, a nice, soft bed. And this prisoner, his name is Jean Valjean, can't deal with the fact that he's been shown this much grace. He can't sleep in a soft bed. So he has the idea that he's going to wake up, get up, and steal the bishop's silver. Well, he does that, but the bishop catches him, and he knocks the bishop out cold and leaves with the silver in the house. Well, the next day, he's arrested, and he's brought back to the bishop. And take a look what happens.
So we'll use wooden spoons. I don't want to hear anything more about it.
I'm sorry to disturb you,
You caught him.
but I had my eye on this man. And
Thank God. I'm very angry with you, Jean Valjean.
what happened to your eye, Monseigneur?
Didn't he tell you he was our guest last night?
Oh, yes. After we searched his knapsack and found all this silver, he claimed that you gave it to him.
Yes. Of course I gave him the silverware. But why didn't you take the candlesticks? That was very foolish. Madame Gillot, fetch the silver candlesticks. They're worth at least 2,000 francs. Why did you leave them? Hurry. Monsieur Valjean has to get going. He's lost a lot of time. Did you forget to take them?
Are you saying he told us the truth?
Of course. Thank you for bringing him back. I'm very relieved.
Release him.
You're really letting me go?
Didn't you understand the bishop?
Madame Gillot, offer these men some wine. They must be thirsty.
Thank you.
And don't forget. Don't ever forget. You've promised to become a new man.
Promise. Why are you doing this?
Jean Valjean, my brother, you no longer belong to evil. With this silver, I've bought your soul. I've ransomed you from fear and hatred. And now I give you back to God.
I love that line, I ransomed you from fear and hatred. That's exactly what God has done in our lives. He's ransomed us from fear, even the fear of disappointing Him, and set us free from any kind of chain that weighs you down, any kind of knot that's get you tied up. But what does it look like? I mean, what does it actually look like in our lives? Well, I have an exercise for you. So just pretend for a second that you're lying down on the ground. You're lying flat on the ground. Your eyes are closed. You can close them if you want. But imagine you've just done the worst thing ever. You've absolutely ruined your life. I mean, you don't know how or if you can get back up. It's a nightmare. You can't believe what's happened, and everything has fallen apart in your life because of what you've done. Now, imagine opening your eyes. Whose face would you want to see first? Whose face would you want looking down at you? It's probably someone who cares about you. Someone who loves you despite what you might have done, despite the disappointments. Someone who will walk with you through those storms. Someone who will be with you so you're not alone in those difficult moments. Whose face would that be for you? God has come to you and said, you're not alone. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I have set you free from fear and from hatred. He has broken the chains, untied the knots. But do we trust Him? We're going to sing a song here in a minute called Chain Breaker. I hope that song will stick with you this week. Because God's grace is so great and so powerful and so real that there is no knot it cannot untie and no chain it can't break. Let's pray together.